Item is 20-98 MSU governance. Let me begin the discussion of this item by reminding you of what has brought us to this point. As I mentioned earlier in the meeting, the conversation regarding the possibility of MSU joining the Texas Tech University system has been ongoing since our February board meeting and subsequent faculty and staff meetings, press conferences, and various meetings on and off campus. While the sheltering in place that began in March modified additional conversations that were anticipated, the administration and board remained engaged during the last 2 months, as we have heard from many individuals about their opinions and thoughts regarding the matter. The university had scheduled a trip for faculty, staff, and students to visit Angelo State University to talk with their counterparts when everything shut down. Since in-person meetings weren't possible, the president's office provided contact information and encouraged departments, governance groups, and individuals on campus to reach out to their counterparts at ASU through virtual meetings or telephone calls. And I think from the reports that we've heard today, those people took advantage of that. At the end of April, we held a virtual town hall, and Vice Chair Marks and I answered questions from faculty, staff, and students. This town hall was live streamed and placed on the MSU board webpage. As we intended, we heard public comments at the beginning of this meeting. And we now finally have an opportunity to discuss together the input we received and to decide on our next steps. With that, I will open the floor for discussion. And before it becomes a free-for-all about who wants to say what, maybe it would be appropriate that Debbie could simply call on each board member right now to address their comments, and when everybody has had an opportunity to speak, then we'll kind of open it up for discussion between the members. Thanks, Debbie.
Sure. Well, I'll just go down the alphabet. So Warren, I know you love being an A.
Been there all my life, unfortunately. I have been listening, trying to gather data that from constituents, other alumni, etc. And overall, everything I have heard has been pretty much positive towards the affiliation with Texas Tech. And I think from the comments we heard today from the 8 letters that were submitted, I feel very positive that, we're moving in the right direction.
Okay. Tiffany?
I don't really have anything else to add. I mean, I've had some discussions with people that I know in the community who are not opposed to it. They think it's a really good idea that we could be joining the Texas Tech system. But I'm just interested for us to talk about how, if this happens, there will be a transference, I guess, of the vision of Midwestern State and how Texas Tech will continue to try to keep some of the traditions that we already have here at the university.
Okay. Regent Fideli.
Oh, thank you, Debbie. So living here in the community, I've heard both positive and negative, mostly positive, related to the potential merger, acquisition, teaming up, whatever you want to call it. I'm excited to continue to visit with the other board members and the community members related to that. I think there are positives for sure, a few negatives, but overall, I think it's a good conversation to continue to have and just make sure that all of our constituents and all those involved with the process have the opportunity to visit. And I had scheduled that meeting, or I was going to be part of that meeting in April to go to Angelo State, but of course we weren't able to do that. And I'd still like to do that before August if possible. So, thank you.
Regent Hessing.
So like Warren and some of the others, I've had some conversations with alums and supporters. I've also talked to some tech alums and supporters. And by and large, the comments have been extremely positive. And I don't mean just positive, I mean extremely positive. Everyone I seem to talk to seems to think it's a great marriage. And in fact, both universities can leverage off the other in several different ways. As to the negatives, one of the things that you opened with was someone saying focus on the negatives. I have to say that I think that's a backwards way to look at it, frankly. I think it's very important to think about the positives. We have to understand there will be negatives. We can't anticipate what, in fact, future boards may or may not do, positively or negatively. I think we have to look at here and now and at least think forward a couple of 3 years so that we can at least be aware of those things. And I think the most obvious negative is that people might view this as we would lose our identity. And I can say, based on conversations I've had in the past with other systems, there is no question we would not lose that. And I think that it would be something that we definitely need to explore and make sure we understand. So that's all I have.
Regent Okeke. Let me make sure I've got you on. I'm having trouble hearing you now. Okay, Oku, we can't hear you at this moment. Let me see. Is your phone working? Let me see. Oh, here. We're going to go on to someone else and see what we can do. Okay, Regent Pang.
I want to echo really what all the other regents have stated so far, and I've been following social media here from the Dallas area, and I really appreciate everybody's honesty in sharing their feedback, and it has been predominantly positive, and it's been really interesting for me to hear kind of the broad spectrum of feedback, and I look forward to discussing further with everyone.
Oku, can we try again?
Yeah, I think I got it.
Got it.
Okay, yeah, I agree with what everybody's saying. I guess I've talked to a lot of alumni and people in the community, and I guess the overall feedback is really, really positive. And in the beginning, I mentioned myself, there were a lot of unknowns that I had, and I think when we first announced it, the community and the alumni, there's a lot of unknowns for them too. But what I mentioned to Dr. Shipley a couple of days ago, I think the university has done an excellent job with their communication, answering a lot of those unknowns and making the public, the alumni, whoever it may be, but making them aware of what's really happening. And that has really reduced a lot of the fears. And I'm really optimistic, and I'm very positive on the steps we're going to make going forward. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Regent Marks.
Well, I do just reiterate what Kevin had said. Our virtual town meeting went, I think, very well. Evidently, it was well received. We did ask about some of the feedback and some of the questions, and hopefully we responded to some of the questions that were of major concern. Overall, it has been more than positive. I think it's going to be a wonderful opportunity for us to become a member of Texas Tech. I do know that our memo of understanding really needs to be detailed, and I think that is a concern there. And I think part of our concerns that we may have and some of the non-negotiables can be placed in that memo of understanding.
Thank you. Regent Sweat.
I agree with everything that has been said. I felt very fortunate to be able to go to Angelo State and have very candid discussions with the folks there. And I think that that experience made reinforced in my mind that Midwestern, should it choose to go with tech, would not be transformed from the MSU that we all know and love. Listening to comments from people within the community, it's been very interesting, and there's such a sense of excitement, but there's also, it's been a great opportunity for folks to kind of be nostalgic and talk about MSU and how much it means to them, and their experiences at MSU when they were here. And some of the folks that I've visited with are of an older age group that didn't graduate in the past 10 years. And and I just keep thinking sometimes that higher education has changed so much, and it is becoming so competitive. And I think that we just need to do the right thing for Midwestern to give them that same competitive edge and to move us forward and help us navigate through a higher ed environment that really didn't exist 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Thank you. Student Regent Wool.
Yeah, I like what Shelley said about how higher education is changing all the time. Day by day, it's constantly changing. And regarding the tech, Regent Marks mentioned really kind of keening on the MOU. And I just think it's a very interesting topic to explore because for students, I mean, there could be more routes towards grad schools and such like that. So I definitely think it's an awesome topic to keep exploring. So, yeah.
Okay, Chairman Krosno, and unless someone has thought of something else, that's your feedback from the Regents.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Let me just I wanted to make a little bit of comment of my own. I think it's been overwhelmingly positive from everyone, I think, so far. There's been a few negative things, but mainly it's been very positive. And I think a lot of the concerns that people have can be addressed in the MOU. And we'll do our best, I know Dr. Shipley will, to include things that are protective of all of our stakeholders in this process. The one thing that's come up in connection with the comments, particularly some of the comments today, is the question about the name. And if you will recall, one of the things that our group said going in, and that Nancy and I in our discussions around have made the point that was somewhat non-negotiable, is the question about the name. With people making comments that maybe having the tech name associated in a more broader fashion in the name would be very positive for the school. Is there how does the group feel about the name thing? Is that something that we should consider again, or give me some thoughts about that?
As a non-board member, may I say one thing? As somebody who got out there and did all these conversations, I think it's a great discussion to have. I would say, however, that if we inserted a name change now, it would disrupt the entire schedule and process. I think the reason we've gotten such positive responses is because the name wouldn't change, and the name change is a whole different discussion, but I would defer to the pleasure of the board.
Well, as we first started this process, that was one of the things that those people involved said was a non-negotiable, that we keep our name. And I think the faculty and everybody I've talked to, that is a very important issue. If it becomes something that we need to do 5 years from now, then there will probably be a change in Tech's administration or something to move forward with that. And I would hope that they would talk to us about it. But I think that that would be a wrong move for us to even think about changing the name.
I agree. I believe that that should be a non-negotiable in our memo of understanding.
I feel the same way. I think that if there is any concern out there, it's a loss of identity of things like that. Well, if we change the name, I think we really have that piled on. And as of now, the information I've been told and my position would be I would not be in favor of changing the name of the university.
Well, I think from the very beginning, we told the tech system people that that was a non-negotiable item for us. And so it's not something that, and they agreed with that. I don't think there's any problem at all from their standpoint with that. But given the fact that we've heard comments that maybe it would be more beneficial, I thought it was worth the discussion. So take your points and we'll move on from that.
If I could say one more thing, I'm gratified by those comments about the name, because I think it shows that when you start nudging toward change, the early adapters go further out with the change, but they're often about 10 to 20% of your crowd who's out ahead. And I think one of the wonderful things that this discussion has allowed in the community is a willingness to talk about change. As one of the regents said, the love for MSU and the way they looked ahead was possible. So I don't mean to jump out and be a naysayer. I just think it might be too much change at once right now.
Is there any further comments from anybody else? Well, I sense the desire of the board would be to move forward to the next step in this process of trying to negotiate a memorandum of understanding. And unless there's somebody who feels differently about that, I would request that somebody make a motion that would allow us to do that. Debbie, if you got some proposed wording that you would like to allow somebody to put forward?
In that regard, this is Warren. I'd like to make a motion. In the light of the board's interest in expanding the dialogue with the Texas Tech University system regarding their invitation to MSU to consider joining the system, I move that the Board of Regents authorize President Shipley to enter into the process of negotiating a memorandum of understanding with the Texas Tech University system in conjunction with the board chairman, so that the Board of Regents can be fully informed by its August 6, 2020 meeting.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion about the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? The motion carries.